just have to fit it back.
Maybe
Thank you.
Oh, should I close the door? I wonder if it's
Close the
not
door in like
necessary.
5 minutes.
Okay, I mean, maybe it's not even necessary. I'm just waiting until it says 6:30. I love when everyone gets so quiet.
Or you're respectful.
Yeah.
So respectful. We're all raised right.
Okay, let's start. Okay, hi everyone and welcome. I'm Shailene, a librarian in the Fiction and Humanities Department here at the Pratt Library. And I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this very special event featuring Moira Egan and Jennifer A. Sutherland. And I just wanted to let you know as we begin that the library has some other great poetry programs coming up, readings, discussions, workshops, and more. So that you can find out about these offerings, please sign up for our poetry event email list, which is in the back of the room on the table. And if you're watching this event online, you can join our poetry list by emailing poetry@prattlibrary.org. So tonight, Moira and Jennifer are each going to read from their recent poetry collections, and then we'll have some Q&A, and that will be followed by closing poems. So I'll begin now by introducing Moira. Moira Egan is the author of 10 books of poetry, most recently The Furies, LSU Press 2025, and Amore e Morte, a bilingual new and selected poems published in 2022. Her poems, essays, and translations have been published in journals and anthologies on 4 continents. In 2023, she won the Rises de Palki Translation Fellowship of the Academy of American Poets for her translations of the poetry of Giorgio Maria Cornelio. She lives in Rome with Damiano Abene, her partner in life, as well as in translation. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Moira's poems read out loud because I love their delicious music and the way it helps us hear what lies just past silence. In the gorgeous little poem, Vilar, for example, close listening reveals a tumult below devotion. Quote, she said that faith is her anchor, but I heard anger. When this poem speaker goes on to remember touching, quote, a page of vellum made of fetal calf skin, buttery, as they say in the trade, the loss of the fetal calf recalls the loss of a son earlier in the poem. This image of a buttery beauty carved out of trauma lights up our minds and our senses, and we feel in a concrete way the heartache buried in silence. The poem closes the gap between the hard G and hard K sounds in anchor and anger, and what was voiceless is voiced. Poet Nicole Seeley has written, formally inventive, darkly funny, and subversively neoclassical, Moira Egan's The Furies is brilliantly contrary. And poet David Starkey calls her one of the best living formalist poets writing in English. Please help me to welcome Moira Egan.
Hello, thank you, Shailene. That was a beautiful introduction. I feel, as they say, humbled, but like for real. And I'm delighted to be reading with my new but very good friend Jennifer in the Poe room, or should we say the Poe room, because we are from Baltimore. And welcome to you all. I'm so glad to see you. I'm going to start with Some Furious Women, a sonnet crown that I wrote when I was teaching the newish now translation of the Odyssey done by Emily Wilson. First woman to translate the Odyssey into English. And she's since done the Iliad. And I think it's a pretty amazing work. Now, and she got some things right that hadn't been gotten right before, and I'm very grateful to her for that. But I thought, these ladies still have some things to tell us. And so I wrote this sonnet crown. I'm going to give you the trigger warnings. Everybody's pissed off in here. And Charybdis is an eating disorder. Just so you know. Hold on a second, get my voice back. AWP was a real challenge on the voice. So this sonnet crown is spoken in 7 different voices. Group therapy for the female characters of the Odyssey. Penelope. I tell them, though they never get it right. I stood beside that pillar, my full height. Athena wrought Pilates. It was me. My strength and cunning were the husbandry that kept our house erect. I used my looks. I mean both glances veiled and my look, my beauty, if a little wrinkled now. But still they wanted me. I was their sow, domestic, they, the rustic rutting boars, the very root of hybrid, it would seem, the root also of hubris. Seamen, seem, the men are praised for coming back from wars. I held our house together, son unharmed, and I will be remembered for my charms. Siren. I sing a song dismembering a charm both dangerous and diligent. More harm than good my reputation, but my song, a dark and smoky brew, Lapsang Tsuchong. I softly croon and whisper, sex, a breath of elemi that sounds and smells like death. You've tied your stubborn captain to the mast. You turn away, you warm the wax. Avast! What if I said I only want your ear, your full attention turned toward me erect? If you could just oblige, I wouldn't wreck your ship, your self-esteem, your plans. To hear, it's not the same. If you can't learn to listen, your bird-pecked skeleton and skull will glisten. Circe. You, peckish skin and bones, I'll have you glistening sweat and pheromones. Come closer, listen. My island welcomes you, a second home, by which I mean you'll never be alone. By which, you call me bitch, I see through you, your pains, your muscles strained, your psyche bruised. I offer wine and honey, sex and food. You men, you grab my girls, you're rough and rude, and you have no idea. I know what glisters is all too often not a precious metal, not silver, gold. I opt then not to settle. I'll put you on the spit and watch you blister, your incense, fragrant, meaty smoke. You swine, you always knew you'd turn out to be mine. If this seems twisted and slightly funny, please feel free to laugh. It's okay, it's okay. Scylla. I'd always hoped you'd turn out to be mine. You powerful, you handsome, you so fine. Whoever you were, politician, god, to your high pinnacle, I'm just a sod. Whatever tale you tell, I'm now the beast, the once a beauty, now the thing with teeth, Picasso monster, vagina dentata. So what about you with your armada of lawyers, lovers tricked into collusion? You treat me as the lesser of two evils. You really want me to go all medieval on your fine ass like some foregone conclusion? You mess with me, it's all gonna go south. And Master, better watch my mouth. Charybdis. The mist, the masticated, watch my mouth. I suck it in, I retch, I spit it out. They worry when they scuttle through my straits. I worry terribly about my weight. I taste, I chew, I swallow, then I purge. It's violent, it's swirly, it's my urge. There's nothing tastes as good as being thin. And so I let you at me sink and swim. Oh, long ago they said, a pretty face. Control, the water scrolls, the basin holds what they extol. At least you have that, darling. Coup de grace. The goddess beauty scratches at my soul. I'll heave you, believe me, from pole to pole. Slight change of tone, you'll be relieved to know. Nausicaa. I heaved him from the beach. I had to pull him in, exhausted, thirsty, sun-mad, full of sea salt and nostalgia. When he woke, he said some words, a name, and then he choked his tears back. I could see it was a game, no, more a strategy, a way to claim his presence with me. Then he took my hand and looked into my eyes. I swear no man has ever looked so deeply in me since. He had no clothes. I gave him mine to wear. I rubbed his skin with oil. I combed his hair. He smelled of sun-baked juniper and incense. We laughed and talked. He said he missed his home. He wished for me I'd never be alone. And finally, Euryclea, the nurse. Some days I wished I'd had a different home. It hurt my heart when every night she'd moan. No way to know she's crying or a dream had taken her. The men downstairs who seemed to overpower her despite her will. I hardly slept at night at all until I felt him out there. I knew he was near. But I am old, invisible. My years, they make me silent. So when he returned, he nearly kicked my bucket, nearly choked me right there on the spot. I sputtered, croaked. I know you more than anyone. I've learned the story isn't ever black or white. I tell them, though they never get it right. And those are our ladies. So I didn't make a playlist because I wasn't sure who was going to be here. And I'm going to read, and seeing who's here, I'm going to read a villanelle, which is the biggest pain in the butt of a poetic form as far as I'm concerned. I was having a conversation with a guy across the street who said, oh, I tried to write a sestina once because sestinas are fine, villanelles are hell. So the only thing I need to tell you about this, those lines that you hear repeating, that's intentional. It wasn't an accident. And if the guy in the last stanza seems like James Joyce, that's fine because he is. And he got in there because of the rhyme. And that's the fun thing that happens too when you write in strict forms. They take you to strange places that you weren't necessarily expecting, including like Dublin, for example. So it's a villanelle called Flawed. I never do exactly as I should. I broke the vase, rearranging the flowers, and perfect is the enemy of good. The painting teacher told us that it's good to lay down light than dark in watercolors. I never do exactly as I should. The little girl who squished about in mud, parental expectations sweet then soured, when perfect was the synonym of good. I left behind that lovely boy who would have married me, fair creature of an hour. I never do exactly as I should. The coulda, woulda, shoulda, all wormwood, and hazardous to psyche, all devour, as does the perfect, enemy of good. At dawn, that polyglottal poet stood, his arms outstretched atop Martello Tower. I never do exactly as I should, and perfect is the enemy of good. Actually, that poem was inspired by the Baltimore and then some poet Michael Saltzman, who I know many of you know him, who was a neurosurgeon. And when he said this phrase to me, perfect is the enemy of good, I'm thinking, damn, you're a neurosurgeon. That is some real stakes in the thing that has become a bit of a cliche. So the next little series of poems I'm going to read, just a few of them, are the way that I kept myself sane during lockdown. As you know, in Italy, we were really locked down. I don't think I left our flat for like 3 months. It was terrible. And so I made up Moira Rules Scrabble. And yeah, I won't explain all the rules, but any language I know a word in that, abbreviations like CEO or WTF, all those things could count. And then I would get more tiles and anagram them. And the anagrammatic nature of this started to infect my brain. So I came back to Baltimore the first Christmas when we were released after lockdown, and I'm telling my family, so this is what I did to keep sane. And a dear nephew of mine said, oh, so basically you invented bananagrams. And I live in Italy, and I said, what's bananagrams? So guess what I got for Christmas? And guess what I use now for my crazy poems? And in Baltimore, with some beloved Baltimore characters in mind, one of these anagrams is an elegy for Gary Blankenberg, my dear friend, and who, when he retired, I took his job at Catonsville High School doing creative writing, and it was one of the best jobs I ever had. Anyway, the thing I should tell you too is that the real title of the poem is at the bottom of the poem, and the anagrammed title is at the top. And instead of having rhymed couplets, the end words are anagrammed. So this is an elegy for Dr. B. Oh, brief derangel. Today the wind blew in, boreal and truculent. No comfort, not in fine labor nor in love. Someone very dear has died, poet, friend, wildly read. He of silver beard prodigious, he who bared psyche, soul. Confessional, he spilled the Stygian noises, flacken of the anima, a prized precision of despair. Cigar smoke wafts on air, bereft. He's left us here. In his death, I relive all those my dearests, revile the damned dark dearth. Who is it snips the thread, anyway? The one I'm named after? Myrrh, dark berry, bitter fate. That's my Gary. Thank you. Did I? Okay, no, I actually did the thing that I wanted to do, which was set the timer going the way I needed it to. I guess a couple more elegies, because why not? Who is it who said, someone said all poems are love poems. Someone else said all poems are elegies. Yeah, I'll go along with that. And this has a Baltimore connection because I'm happy to say that it was published in the wonderful journal Smartish Piece, and it was a finalist for their Erskine J. Prize. And it kind of explains what's going on there. The real title is Gone, Half My Life. And the anagrammed title is Fain Holy Flame. Intaglioed in my heart, broad-shouldered quasi-macho, bard of bastardry, say that 10 times fast, bastardry, of badassery, ever at the verge of his dear abyss, how he delighted in dreadness, metaphysical dark, the sad red sensibility, fine wine and siren song. Who knows who holds the reins in a life, anyway? Cloak blown about as if on moors, law, taboo, unblocked. This is no fiction, no hyperbole. Falling in slow-mo, noble Hyperion, always the ice-eyed wolf dog by his side. He left behind wife, cold eye cast. Left behind children, too. No glance back, no salt pillar. And no hit colder, the daughter who knows he must go. Rue leapt clean over. Memory, the sweet rogue petal. That one's not very cheerful. Sorry. I want to read because I spent, despite my very pale skin, it has been my weird fate to live in the Mediterranean and to have to use SPF 100 every day. But one of the nice things about living in that part of the world is having an intimate relationship with the sea. And I don't know what I would do without my intimate relationship with the sea. And so I wrote a guzzle. And this very happily appeared on the Academy of American Poets poem of the day. Oh my God, almost exactly a year ago. And so you know how the guzzles work, all the repetition, and then in the final stanza, you're supposed to sign your name in some way or another. The final stanza is a couplet by E. Cummings, which you will recognize. And didn't he very so kindly sort of sign my name for me? I was grateful that he did that, Mr. Cummings. So it's Guzzle, C, with a final couplet by E. Cummings. As Karen Blixen said, the cure's the sea, or sweat or tears, but I prefer the sea. In fact, it's homeopathy. Why cry with eyes baptized if reddened by the sea? The metaphors of fabric come to mind, cool silk or aqua velvet, summer sea. Or better, come to body, intimate, enveloped skin on skin, the lover sea. The bone ache deep, the pain's gone unexplained. For now, just dive, ameliorator sea. The mermaid's tears, smoothed glass or plastic, lovely, but hazardous to creatures of the sea. This evening's rough, Poseidon snaps my straps, pathetic fallacy, bipolar sea. And in their one-piece suits, the ladies age and silver, laugh and rage, September sea. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. And that seems like a good place to end. Although I'm ending on E. Cummings and not me, E. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And I am very much looking forward to hearing Jennifer's poems. So.
Thank you so much, Moira. That was such a delight. I wanted to go on listening to you for the whole night. But now I'm also very excited to hear Jennifer read, and I'm going to introduce her. Jennifer A. Sutherland is the author of House of Myth and Necessity. Here it is with this beautiful cover. And Bullet Points, a Lyric, which was a finalist for the Forward Indies Poetry Book of the Year, and also the Eric Hoffer Medal Provocateur. The poet Natalie Shapiro writes of Jennifer's work that it is, quote, relentless, harrowing, and tremendously smart. Jennifer's poems and essays have appeared or will soon appear in Plume, Arcturus, Chicago Review of Books, Chicago Quarterly, Birmingham Poetry Review, Epic Hopkins Review, Best New Poets, Denver Quarterly, and elsewhere. She earned her MFA at Hollins University, and she lives and works in Baltimore, and you can find her at jenniferasutherland.com. Jennifer's poems take us on surprising journeys. Her poem Alcestis as res ipsa, for example, begins with a legal notion, the idea that guilt can be inferred where there is no direct proof. But imaginative language soon challenges that concept. The beloved person who interrupts a marriage becomes a butterfly entering a window, and the betrayed spouse becomes a mythical character, a rhymy ferryman, oval-eyed and wary. That was a quote, that wasn't me. By the time we reach the last line of the poem, quote, I'm saying sorry, close quote, the word sorry, provocatively rhyming with wary, suggests something much richer and more complicated than guilt. The poet Amanda Newell has written of House of Myth and Necessity. These poems interrogate and deconstruct cultural myths about female sexuality and womanhood, about being a wife and mother, about the real cost of difficult choices. But they also speak to the beauty of survival. This is a brave, powerful, and necessary collection, close quote. Please help me to welcome Jennifer A. Sutherland.
Thank you so much, Shailene. Thank you, Moira. We have had several days now of amazing weather,
and my immune system is not taking it well. And it is in fact losing its mind, and I hope that my voice is going to last for this reading. I hope that my voice is more Betty Davis, less Fran Drescher, but I am not contagious. Shailene showed you the cover of this book. This is Alcestis. She's swooning on the cover. And I want to tell you a little bit about her story, because these poems are, for the most part, persona poems. They're poems in the voice of Alcestis, or in the character of Alcestis. And Alcestis is a Greek mythological character, one of those Greek women, and her husband Admetus finds out that he's going to die. And because this is ancient Greece, he is told by the god Apollo, who owes him a favor, that if he can find someone to take his place, he doesn't have to die. The other person can stand in for him. And Admetus goes around to everyone he knows. He goes to his parents, he goes to his friends, and no one will agree to do it for him. And finally, Alcestis says, you know what, I'll do it. And she volunteers, and she dies in her husband's place. And also, because this is Greek myth, Hercules shows up. When he finds out that this has happened, he treks down into hell and he brings Alcestis back. And this is a very strange play. It's a play by Euripides based on what is probably a much older story. And if you know anything about Euripides, he's ambiguous. Things that you're expecting to be tragedies tend to come with comic elements. Things that you expect to be funny tend to come with tragic elements, and this is one of those plays. And he ends it on a completely ambiguous note, with Alcestis standing there before her husband, and they're facing each other, and Alcestis never speaks. And as I was writing these, I was sort of thinking about a way of speaking in a long line of women who are inheritors of Alcestis' story. That's the myth part of House of Myth and Necessity. I'm going to start, the first poem is Alcestis' Fibonacci sequence. I'm just going to read, I think, some of this, because it's based on the Fibonacci sequence. If you know how that works, that just goes on and on and on and on. And if I read this whole poem, we would probably be here all night. So I'm just going to read a couple of sections of this. 0. You want to know the path by which a woman trades herself to death? Well, it goes like this. A kernel plants and then devours itself and leaves a trace. A trace shows that someone has passed by, but not who is. Augustine's arithmetic of God in mortal creatures depends upon a cause. Assuming a wind of constant velocity and objects of equal mass, the fallen leaves will gather in the corners, around a building's coins, the joints, which in this case serve as obstacles to movement. In my case, the first variable is that my mother broke a vow. Before I was born, at least that's what I've always thought. That she left because she no longer sought to dedicate herself to God. But I have asked myself recently if in fact she was no longer what he wanted, and what might have changed in the time that she was with him. Is it possible that her own immense secret was discovered? Anyone would feel rage, disillusionment, to be cast out from the de facto family when the family du jour is inadequate. In any event, there is the problem of the promise made and then regretted, even for reasons which could not have been foreseen. Not even by the most reasonable, prudent person. For me, math and laws are equivalent. The firework carried onto the train platform initiates the first turning of the gear inside the Rube Goldberg machine. This promise explodes a need the body has not yet spoken. I call it a machine because it generates constant motion, a cause or a way, and a fundal pressure, whereby the proceeding is made a cause of action, a pleading, resulting in a birth. Every violence, a function of muscle, clenched and released. 1. Establishing shot, through partially opened vehicle window. Back seat of a long car, thin swooped whaler, thigh-high, harpoon hoisted, petard and tusk, head shape, weight. Not his car, nor the Thessalian Ocean I was expecting. Front seat, thin swooped hardtop, I am younger here, stringy-haired, gap-toothed. Rows of pale yellow stitches reticulating the bench seat and the mechanized, leathery intuition that attention paid is a piston-driving memory. The older self is folded into the glove box, a negotiable instrument kited. Debit account dispenses forward travel and a jaunty tune. Come on down, next contestant, behind door number 1, boyfriend. Behind the other, murkier, grandfather. Interchanged, interstate. When the game goes badly for me, I'll assume it was my fault, not that the score is predetermined. Metal door creak and click and lock. The seats are olive-colored, the dashboard cool, texture of a lizard's skin. Lizards cannot warm themselves. They depend upon the sun, its constant ministrations, to stay alive, a stasis maintained with reference to certain necessary outside forces, mathematics. Strange, still life, moving landscape with girl. My history identifies and circumscribes me, but everything sleeps, so I do too, nose to tail, fishbowl eyes swiveling from front to back, the facts, objective, change depending on the camera lens, the view. What right has any one of us to doubt the destination a person gives herself if it means she gets to go somewhere? Reflected light, its sum and antecedents pinned to the cold foil recoil of recognition. 1. Over the shoulder shot at grocery store checkout. I have 2 books from the library in the rusty strip mall, empty pizza shop at one end and a Rite Aid at the other, a photomat in the middle of the parking lot. We have driven the whole length of Hazelwood to get here, even though the Enoch Pratt in Hamilton would be closer. My mother wants to cash a check and buy cigarettes, and there is a grocery store across from this library, a Buy-Right or a Rose's. It has a corkboard near the checkout lines where people pin up their ads for babysitting or piano lessons or used cars. There are things you need, and you can help them, and that is good, which is what we all should be. On this particular afternoon, when we walk in, there's a flyer with my mother's face. It says, "Do not cash checks," but she'll try anyway. So I sit down on the faded bench. The gray metal on the cross beams shows beneath the peeling wine-dark paint. I take out a book from my canvas bag. I also like this library better, even though that isn't why we've come. You're a little young for that one, a man says, nods toward a tree grows in Brooklyn, while he gently lays a bag of peaches on the top of a brown paper shopping bag. That book, he says again, point of view shift. 2 weeks later, we are back because we have to return the books we checked out, and so we can buy tomatoes for supper. I see the man, the thin strands of white hair he combs over his red scalp. I say, it wasn't her fault, you know, and he wants to know whose fault it was then. I pretend I haven't heard the question, because suddenly I can see the cascade of fault in all of them, like tree bark petal scabbing over dying wood petals. Only trying to be alive, to do what it has been inscribed to do. Stupid Katie marries a man who drinks too much. Johnny's sick to death at Christmas. Each mistake compounding and even eating other mistakes and packing them down and suffocating the tree until the narrative is wormy white beneath. And Francie will do it too, won't she? I sit down on the sagging bench to wait again. Another poem set in Baltimore. Alcestis as a Hun, but not the kitschy cute kind. There were like 3 clubs worth going to, and we went to none of them. Our accents were mostly different and a little the same. Your York Road, you, and my Blair Road. You have to be from here to understand it's Bel Air. I have to explain what people can't figure out for themselves but they hate it when I do. I rode the number 15 down to Erdman Avenue. My little brother got sepsis playing out back behind the house in the alley. He dunked his foot into a hole filled up with rain and rat shit. Meanwhile, husband, you were living just down the street from a pool club and Jim Palmer. He used to crash his poppy red Corvette right through the middle of the ball game like a line drive. Like he didn't give a crap about the batter or the baseman because he didn't. No one liked him either. Not even the Artie Donovan era farts who sat around the Valley Inn popping natty bows, which were shit beers then too. This is not me being wistful for the neighborhood. Just me putting two and two together while I write this down. How you always knew when I'd been to your apartment while you weren't there, while I wasn't there, from tiny clues I guess I left behind. Maybe the carpet looked less impeccably new because I shed some skin cells on it, or I moved a coaster on the coffee table 1/4 millimeter to the right. You were such a stickler for things being exactly how you wanted them. When you were 12, you soaked a car on mischief night and took off on your scooter, mortified and with your next-door neighbor in pursuit. At that age, I got myself arrested in a high school parking lot with a 4-pack of coolers in my lap. They cost me one quick flash of my fledgling boobs. And then this officer showed up and shined his department-issue flashlight on them just a little longer than was necessary. While he took the bottles off me, I sat handcuffed to a desk chair while he filled out his paperwork. None of this was badass, by the way, or extraordinary, only desperate. A bid to let me play 2 minutes in heaven in the closet with a script that wouldn't have me working at a Taco Bell, which is why I never figured out how to hit you back. Also, you never once came home from school to a ringing phone, a bill collector asking where your mother's mortgage payment was, late like it was every month, and you were also never late. You never frantically counted out the minutes ticking while a little plastic bar sucked up your pee. And Wells Fargo, you can go and fuck yourself because you called all the time. And once when I was in the bathroom peeing on the plastic stick. If I'm being honest, I'll admit I thought when I climbed in your 1992 maroon Accord, I was going to blow this place like a fucking princess. Like F you Catholic schoolgirls, and F your Benetton, and your Depeche Mode, and F your asymmetrical wedge haircuts, and I guess I did get somewhere, but I did not ask for this death descending between us like a fat, feathered disappointment in the middle of Bel Air Road between St. Michael's Church and a Taco Bell. I was very careful to say Bel Air the second time. My dad is here, by the way. My dad, who is a retired English teacher, and to whom I owe many or most of the literary references in my work because of the books that he introduced me to as a child. And as I was reading this poem just now, and I was talking about being arrested in the high school parking lot, he was shaking his head because he remembers that happened. And I'm going to be bold and read this poem now with my dad in the room. It's okay because he's heard it before. It's called Alcestis as a Kubrick film, ending in a line by Linda Hall. The film is The Killing. It's 1956 or so noir by Stanley Kubrick, one of his earlier films. And the poem is Black Mare. And Linda Hall is a poet I love and admire and go to again and again and again. She's a poet whose book I discovered when I was a teenager during senior week, I think, in Ocean City in a bookstore. And a couple of her poems are recognizably set in Baltimore. And this was the first time that I realized it was possible to write poems about the place that you lived in. So thank you, Linda, wherever you are for that. Unglamorous, sallow, brown, but with the same ruined flowers, windows peeled down like strips of paper, headlights off. Eventually, it wasn't cars and parking lots. Boys took me to the sullen rooms they rented along trucking routes. The desk clerk might take one look at me from above his reading glasses, and then shake his head. Mostly, though, the clerks plucked room keys off their hooks and gave us both an attaboy look, a go-get-em boyo. For the prize I represented in my second-hand gunny sacks, powder blue, tulle skirt, the bodice crossed with sequins like a pie lattice. Or it might have been the white satin dress I wore to someone's high school harvest ball, portrait collar, kitten heels, both lent to me by someone's older sister who picked them up on sale at Sears. The boys wore their father's good suit jackets, their bony shoulders bolstered underneath the bunching fabric, or nubby yellowed Oxford shirts and skinny ties just like Rick Ocasek wore when he drove girls home. Boys with their caldera mouths, thick fingers, patches of the fine dark hair that grew inside the smalls of backs, in places where my fingers crept, boys with eyes closed, boys looking to the side at water glasses in their paper caps, or at the printed roses fading on the drywall's vine. Boys who waited silently, impatiently beside the door while I made searching inquiry of sheets and carpet for the galaxy of sequins fallen from the borrowed dresses. In such rooms, the television's always on and tuned to something colorless. One night a boy slept beside me while I watched Sterling Hayden cram a pile of stolen cash into a suitcase, watched him labor at it, sweat it. There was a woman waiting for him and for that money. It was too heavy to be carried on, and so he had to check it. And then the bag cracked open on the tarmac. Tenderly, the camera follows as the bills go soaring off. The idling jet's engines propelling them at varying velocities as stars spin faster while they linger in the grip of gravity. They meander orbits plotted for them by their own idle involutions. Inevitably, it seems we are undone by mundane things, devoid of grandeur or significance, an overloaded baggage cart, an X marked monthly, and then for 9 months not. The sure thing horse that breaks its leg in the final stretch. What's the difference, mumbled Sterling as the police approach him and the screen falls dark. When the sleeping boy awoke, we stepped out into the humid nighttime air. He slipped into the driver's seat while I stood there fumbling with the lock. He took his time with disengaging, not looking at me even once. Years have passed since then, and I still search for schemas in what's been merely scattered. And once I finally concede, I watch, reflected in the window glass, the stars dragging the weight of their own illuminations into the rooms of this vast hotel of the past. What did we learn? I like to read that one at weddings. Sestinas are indeed fine. I'm going to read one. This is called Alcestis as the String of Numbers in a Man's Mouth at 3 a.m. It was the one thing they both wanted, to own a house and live out their days there. Then 3 days after they unpacked, he asked her for something to help him sleep. He took 5 of her pink Benadryls. He slept 6 hours restlessly that night and 6 the next, and then he stopped sleeping. Once when his psychosis was at its worst, 5 months later, and the two of them were climbing into bed, she cried for 10 minutes while he stared at her, not blinking. She'd called 911 3 times by then, and 3 times the ER sent him home after 6 hours observation. That was when she gave up waiting for a solution, a reckoning, an explanation, and wondered if this was it the rest of her life, this. All she wanted now was to climb into the bathtub in the morning, 5 or 10 minutes of floating in the still water, another 5 in the shower, so her hair at least was clean. Then she outfitted the 3 children with their backpacks and lunch totes and drove them to school. After that, she gave the office 6 distracted hours, which was all she could afford, and 1 exhausted hour in the evening after she put the kids to bed. For months, that's how it was, and he used up his 4 months of disability, and the mortgage payment was almost $5,000, and they owed the contractor for carpet installation on the first floor, and the countertops guy, and the arborist who dug out 3 trees that were half dead when they moved in, and $1,600 for the landscaping that wasn't finished yet. At 2 a.m, she wasn't sleeping either anymore. And she turned to him one night and looked at him hard, examining his face for any sign he understood what he was doing to them both. His 6-month separation from reality had them in the hole by $5,000 so far, and 3 times she asked him, "Do you even remember me? I only want to know that you'll come back." And he, as he had begun doing, pulled at one ear and cleared his throat, and rocked back and forth and counted off 2, 6, 9, 8, 3, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. One more. Alcestis in a well-ordered system. My mother and me and Madam X. Such shoulders she had. But which woman do I mean, you ask? I don't know. I am looking at the 3 of us, smeared in vague into this neat square, tilted at a crazy angle. Who took this photo? They are not, I have no idea. Ideas are fleeting, they fleet. They are not susceptible of portraiture, but we do try. This was the year, I was 12 maybe, or 13, of being inconsolable. And she finally asked me, what? What do you want? And the truth was unspeakable, so I said art. She drove us one weekend to an exhibition. We walked and looked and admired, and someone took this photo in my hand, and there I am, receded into all that hazy cocoa and velvet, the camera flash reflected in my lenses. You see what I've done. A painting in a photo in a poem. There is the most lovely satin ribbon running through it, but it will be sullied if you hold it, so don't. Please. I telephoned her, my mother, not the XX of the portrait or this poem, 30 years after we stood there awkwardly grinning. Called her mommy. Could she please, I said, please. Could she come and get me? And she could not. So I went home in the pale blue gown they draped me in when I arrived the week before, mouth blacked through the efforts of the ambulance man. The strings wouldn't tie in the back. Not all the way, which is how these things go, always teased, never polished off. The loosened gown slipped down one shoulder, the skin beneath exposed, white, creamy, milky, scandalous. A taxi took me back to my apartment. You see, I warned you. I said, let the ribbon go. There is no need for you to catch it. It dirties when you finger it. The skin's own oils insinuate themselves onto the sanctity of the fabric's glossy surface. The field I stand in now has the same ochre, the same lumpy furrow, and it recedes into whatever it is that holds it still. There is a ribbon in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was amazing. I really enjoyed your poems. So now we're going to do a little Q&A, we welcome your questions for Jennifer and Moira. I'm going to repeat the questions. I thought I'd just get things started though by asking a kind of obvious question, but just your books both draw so much on mythology and are so unified by those concepts. And I guess I'm curious about how mythology inspires you, just how that works for you as a poem trigger, but also how the books came about. Like, did you just find yourself writing a lot of poems about these characters, or was it kind of a project that you planned? Like, I'm curious about that. So if you could take turns talking a little about that, and then I'll hope someone in the audience has an additional question.
I think your subjects come to you a lot of the time when you need them to, or when you're ready for them to come to you, and that's how it worked for me with Alcestis. My first book is about my experience of a courthouse shooting, and after this shooting, I sort of blew up my life. I walked away from my marriage. I walked away from my job for a couple of years. I went and I did an MFA. And during my MFA, this was late in life. I was in my 40s. I was struggling to write about this experience, and I could not write about it at all. I was writing about my marriage. I was writing about my mother. And a lot of these are the poems that made their way into this book. This is actually the first book that I have written. It's published second. But Alcestis came to me and made herself a container for things that I was struggling to think about and struggling to write about. And I think that's because I needed her. And I think sometimes that's how women's stories work. And I'm really grateful that she came to me when she did.
Yeah, I second everything that Jennifer said, except not with Alcestis. I have to say one of the main projects of my writing, I think, is that line that's the first line and then the final line of the sonnet crown. I tell them, though they never get it right. And someone who read this manuscript before it became a book, okay, what I'm about to say makes what I just did really funny. It's about voice, and it's about voicelessness and not being heard. And my personal geography is I lived in Greece for 3 years, and I go back to Greece frequently. And a running joke I had is that you're so there with those myths, those stories. They're not just folklore. They're there. There really are people who worship Apollo. There really are people who worship Dionysus. It's very cool. And sometimes you look at a sunset and you go, oh yeah, that's why they made those gods that way. Or the gods just speaking to us that way. And now I live in Italy. So, same gods, different names. But also, anybody in here, sorry, Damiano, if you're watching, Italy is still a noticeably patriarchal society, and I sometimes feel silenced. And poems are a way not to feel silenced. And to use those archetypal constructs, you bring in the literary history, those stories. You just kind of put in the allusion does a lot of work for you, but you're also expressing something that you needed to express that maybe you couldn't express on your own with a construct that bolsters you, unless you say what you need to say. But I think I'm saying a lot of what Jennifer just said as well.
And that was great. Does anyone else want to ask a question?
I have like a follow on to that. I'm interested in you had this little throwaway line about this was the first book, the second published, and I'm interested in hearing from both of you about process a little bit. One thing tied to the first question that I'm very interested in was how much other writing happened while you were working on these, right? Was it sitting down every day and working on these particular kinds of poems, whether you already had a vision for your collection in mind or not? Or was it like, what's going to happen today? And oh, look, I'm writing about this again, or something else altogether.
And I'm just going to try to repeat the question. As this is a question about process, whether the poets wrote about other types of poems as well as the poems in the book, or how focused they were on a particular kind of poem in a given day. When I restate, it always changes a little bit, but something like that. Thanks.
My full-length books, I think I'm not gonna lie, are, they all come in sections. And I think I'm not lying. I've done some chapbooks that are very contiguous in theme and form. But so this one has 6 sections. The first section that got written was the Odyssey Girls. And it was because of what I said. I was teaching this wonderful translation, thinking, I still have something to say. Then a couple of the sections in there, the anagrams for one thing, which was a formal challenge during lockdown. Those happened during lockdown. And they were actually, there's some terrible poems. They're some of the most difficult things I've ever written, but they felt fun in writing because of the anagram game. Then there's a section called Plague Poems that were also written during lockdown. I mean, what else was I gonna do but write poems? But also my husband is an epidemiologist, so I was up close and personal with all the thoughts of what was happening with the pandemic. So that's a section. And then the way I work anyway is that a kind of arc starts to happen, and then I know what I need to do to fill it in. And so about 3 years ago, I was very lucky to have a fellowship at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. And I knew that there needed to be one more section here, and it was going to be a heroic sonnet crown, or in this case, a heroinic sonnet crown, called The Furies. That's about all the, and I was writing this in 2022, and there are some lines about a pussy-grabbing president and the overturn of precedent. And I'm thinking, oh, well, this is not so relevant. I want to say, make my book irrelevant again. So anyway, that's my process. And it's all very scattered. Writing every day, hell no. But once it kind of comes, the same way with my poems, they tell me what they need to be. And I know that sounds totally woo, but it's true. In that same way, the books have said, all right, this is how it's going to be. And it can be a slow, not very easy process.
I have a system of notebooks. And I think that I tend to be a project book writer. I get an idea for a project that I want to explore, and then I wind up just chasing that theme through one poem after another, and that was true for my first book, which is a book-length poem, and it was true for this book, which are these Alcestis poems. And then I have published a bunch of other poems that aren't sort of thematically linked at some point, so maybe there's a third book that will just be my poems from that particular notebook. But I think that when I am prolific, and prolific for me is not really prolific, but for my prolific, when I'm producing like maybe 2 or 3 poems a month or something, that tends to be because I'm chasing a theme.
Other questions? I thought I might have seen a hand before. Yes, please.
Kind of piggyback off of that, when it comes to theme and form, do you feel like certain forms lend themselves to certain themes? Do you go in with the theme first and then find a form? Do you get excited about a form and then find themes that work with that?
Okay, this is a great question. Which comes first, the form or the theme?
For me, it's the form. And I have very definite ideas about what stanzas should look like, oftentimes coming into the poem, how the poem should be shaped, that kind of thing. And there are a number of poems I can think of where I had ideas and the poem never really came together until I figured out what shape it should be in, what the form should be. And my whole first book is like that. I walked around, like I said, not sort of unable to write about this experience. And I had an idea for a stanza that was sort of a line and then a drop kind of chunk of indented paragraph. I don't really even know what you would call it. But that, once I had that shape, the whole book, the whole first book came together. So I think shape is very important for me.
Yeah, I agree. And even more strongly, I think the better poems that I've written, it happens at the same time. The poem has an intelligence, and certain forms do certain things, different kinds of repetition. Villanelle, sestina, triolet, triolet, however we want to say it in English. What you're emphasizing, and there are different ways to use those forms to write obsessions, which I think is a lot of fun as a poet also. It's interesting what you said about your first book, Bullet Points. It's a really fine book, and it's bullet points, and it's inevitable, and it's really brilliant. But that idea that they, and for me, I'm a very formal poet. I mean, for those of you who know me, although I do occasionally dabble in free verse, and I don't know what that means, but
It means it's
knows.
a damn good poem.
Yeah, so I hope that's something of an answer. I have a clear sense of why we have the idea of the muses. Because if you've been doing it, if you've been reading and writing and working and paying attention, and you have these chops, it's like that idea of flow that you have in physical pursuits. It doesn't feel conscious, but that comes out of the work that you've been doing all the years, and and there's this sense of flow. I mean, I'm speaking in an ideal writing moment that doesn't happen very often or all the time, but when it's there, it doesn't feel like it came from you. It feels like, one of them sisters up there helped you out. And I get that, and I appreciate it when it happens. Thank you, Arvada.
Thank you. Any other questions? Topics? Oh, go ahead.
Thinking about the sonic quality, both of like ancient Greek poetry and the poems that you guys create, how do you feel that helps lift your own voice and the voices of women and the voices of whoever, characters that you're trying to uplift in your own stories? As opposed to, fiction, just straight prose.
Okay, I'm going to try to repeat this, but I'm a little hard of hearing, so I might have missed. I think you're asking whether the sonnet form and ancient Greek forms that are inherited help lift up voices, or just you want to try, or
The sonic quality, like
the
sound
sonic.
of the poem.
Okay. No, great. Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you want to speak to the way the sound itself elevates? And maybe one of you can repeat the question better. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I mean, we are the singers, right? I mean, we are the singers of our songs, and our songs aren't necessarily the stories of wars or conquering. Our songs are the stories oftentimes of hearths, and loves, sometimes loves between women, or loves between men and men. I mean, I think when we're joining our voice to a tradition that is the singers of these kinds of songs and stories. And when we're doing that, I mean, every time we tell a story, every time we write a poem, we're joining this long sort of tradition of songs that goes all the way back. That was an extraordinarily winding way of saying that, I think.
Got a perfect one. If you haven't read the Penelope by Margaret Atwood, do that. And I'm thinking, to piggyback onto what Jennifer was saying too, my Penelope says, "The men are praised for coming back from wars. I held our house together, son unharmed, and I will be remembered for my charms." So that what is valued in the outside world as opposed to the domestic sphere, I think that's an ongoing issue in women's writing, is say our stories are just as important as those, the Iliad, the war stories. And using those female characters who have kind of inched their way into that, but haven't been allowed to say as clearly their experience. I mean, but this is a whole, I like what we're doing, Jennifer and I, but we're not pioneers in this field. A lot of many women writers, I mean, not just in the past couple of centuries, but have been doing this, flipping the myth and saying, I'm gonna look at this from a different perspective. And listen up, dude. That being a message, there's something else that needs to be said here. I hope that sort of answered your question.
Yeah, that was a lovely question, thank you. I saw another hand, please.
What do you like to listen to when you're writing?
Okay, what do you like to listen to when you're writing?
Silence.
That's such a funny question for me, because I grew up in a house in which the television was always on. And so I get very anxious if there isn't some level of background noise. The only time the house that I grew up in was silent was if something terrible was happening, and my mother was angry at everyone. So I get kind of anxious if things are too quiet. I am a great consumer of YouTube videos with bird songs and stuff like that. So I find that very helpful.
Anyone else? Maybe one more question or not? Okay, well, thank you all. Those were great questions. And thank you, Moira and Jennifer, for these great answers. So I think we're gonna have some closing poems. Do you wanna come back to the lectern they're just gonna each read for a few more minutes? Very close, thank you.
Oh, no, that's not why. I just thought we'd do a chiasmus kind of thing.
What to read? Let's do a sonnet. It is an honor to be reading with Moira, and how could I not read a sonnet if I had one?
Thank you.
Alcestis as res ipsa loquitur. One day I opened up the kitchen window and ushered in a butterfly. You will recognize the metaphor and what it meant, that I loved someone else. I know it wasn't what you wanted to hear. But count up all the years you undertook to chamber me, more than 6, the perfect number. Your own peculiar passage vanquished you. You yielded all the way to ash and spit, your venom out at breakfast. By night, you were a rhymy ferryman, oval-eyed and wary. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying sorry.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a really, really fine sonnet. I love that one. I'm not going to read a sonnet. Shailene mentioned the strange poem, Velar, and it's the last poem in the book. And it does have to do quite literally with voice. If you don't know the word Velar, it's a linguistic term, and it has to do with the sounds that come out that are made with sort of, when your tongue goes against the back of your throat, your palate. And everything else is self-explanatory in the poem, I think. But the strange thing is, I didn't know that there was an annual anthology called The Best Spiritual Literature. And God knows I never expected that Moira, Egan would have a poem in such a thing. But This was published in the Hopkins Review, and they nominated it for the best spiritual literature. And there it was, son of a gun. So, and let me thank again Enoch Pratt and Shailene and the crew and Jennifer. What a pleasure to read with you, and you all for being here. So this is Wheeler. She said that faith is her anchor, but I heard anger. Fragile, fraught faith, bells and beeswax candles, a baseless base, frankincense and myrrh, common sense thrown out the stained glass window. Those characters we studied in the minster windows, transluced as through a membrane, luteous. A medieval monk with spectacles round like vintage Elton's. Who knew that kind of vision was possible back then? Her son a suicide, impassable the life, ever unable to translate love from the cradle to where he was. Once I touched a page of vellum made of fetal calfskin. Buttery, as they say in the trade. Disruptive to the systems, anger or anchor. Both Wheeler, one voiced, one voiceless.
Thank you so much. So our time is drawn to an end, but I want to encourage you all to spend more time with Moira's and Jennifer's amazing work, which you can do by purchasing copies of their books. The Ivy Bookshop is selling those just outside the door of this room. And Moira and Jennifer, I hope will sign books at this table at the front here for you. And I want to thank Moira and Jennifer again for your lovely readings and remarks. And thanks to all of you for coming tonight. Please enjoy the rest of your evening.